Hello everybody and welcome back to another training video for DEQ's Environmental Data Mapper. My name is Rex Robichaux. I'm the GIS Administrator here at Virginia DEQ, and today's video we're going to take a look at feature pop-up functionality and some of the tips and tricks as far as extracting the most amount of useful information from the pop-ups of records. Feature pop-ups are probably the predominant way to get feature level information out of the environmental data mapper. So it's going to be a really common means of interaction that you'll find yourself using to find specific information for records. So with that said, we'll go ahead and dive in. I'm going to look at a few examples for various layers and how pop-ups both are similar and may vary from layer to layer. So like we looked at in the last video here, you see the DEQ data layer list. We're going to start today by taking a quick look at some of our pollution response prep reports data. So I'm going to go ahead and check that on. We can see here it's a pretty feature-rich, dense point layer. So we'll zoom in, and again we can expand this and see what the various symbology means. So, for example, say we wanted to take a look at what this new prep report record was south of Lynchburg. This goes for every single layer for the most part within the environmental data mapper. All you have to do to get the pop-up to produce is just to click a record, and we can see here the information that's produced for a record. So if you click around, you can see different feature pop-ups as they pop up. So this last one that I just clicked on here, you get some basic attribution that's produced. We see here that the actual site name in this case, and this will vary per layer for what's displayed up top. Sometimes it's a permit ID, sometimes it's a site name, sometimes the facility ID. For our pollution response data, it's the site name that's produced at the top. And then below it, you can see the general attribute information. Most of our data sets right now, you'll also see this data set download. And if you click this link, it's actually going to take you out to a new tab and take you to our open data portal where you can actually interact further with this data and download it if you want. You could filter on it and download it and so on and so forth. But just as a disclaimer, not all of our layers yet have that, but we're working to build that out to where this data set download will be a pretty standard thing that you see. When clicking on it, it will take you to that layer. So moving on, here we see information specific to this record in this layer in the EDM. This will vary depending upon what layer you're looking at, as we'll see here in a second. And all the information that's captured in the pop-up, you can right-click, copy, and paste out of if you want to, say, paste this into Word or someplace locally just to store record information. If you click on something with a lot of information, you can also click this maximize button up here, and it's going to give you more real estate or more screen space to view all the attribute information. Similarly, you can now click restore to kind of minimize it and put it back down. If the pop-up comes up in an area that's covering something else you need to see, you can always click and drag this around a little bit to relocate it, free up some screen space. But it will still keep the feature highlighted with that kind of cyan square there, so you can still see what you actually clicked on, so it's not confusing. Lastly, you'll see this ellipses down here. We're not going to cover all of these, as these are touched on in some of the other videos we'll be doing, but I do want to show that this view and attribute table, if you click that, it will also open up the attribute table, and it should take you to the record of interest there. Within the attribute table as well. So with that said, we'll go ahead and close out of that. We'll take a look at another point-based layer here real quick. It happens to be the one right below it. Our renewable energy permits is another example. Again, the symbology is going to be different as this is a different data set. But say, for example, we wanted to see what this solar permit active producing power record is. As you can see here, this is different, obviously, than the prep layer. This is telling you the name of that permit, as well as the permit number. And you'll see here, as we would expect, the attributes different. If we were to click this would also take us out to the open data portal page, but specific to the renewable energy permits. All right, so we looked at a couple point layers here. Now let's actually look at kind of a different format of data. So I'll look at our water quality assessment WQA layers. we're going to turn on the 2020 estuaries. So this is our most recent biannual assessment data. And as you see, I checked it on here, and we see they're kind of color-coded, fully supporting insufficient information or not supporting as far as various classifications go. I'll click up here in the Rappahannock area. We can see here that there's a lot more text-rich attribution in this data set. This one might be a good one to use that maximize button on so we can much more easily read all the content that's available for a record here. And as we work our way down, we just see that it's really the same type of information. It's all attribute information, just a lot more of it for this particular data set. One thing that I'd like to talk about in detail here is this happens to be one of the layers that supports or features related data. So for some of our data sets, when you produce the pop-up, if you scroll to the bottom and you see related tables down here, that means that there's a table that's actually related to this layer that contains additional information that might be relevant. So as we can see here, the 2020 estuaries layer is actually related to our 2020 WQA cause group codes. If we click this, it's actually going to show us all of those related records. So in this case, that one assessment unit record that we just clicked on for that estuary is actually associated with what looks like 5 different cause group code records. So if we click on this, it will actually take us to that related record so we can see more information. Here's the related information for this cause group code as it's associated back to that estuary assessment unit. So if you want to go back, you can just click back and back again. It will take you back to the initial pop-up, and we'll go ahead and close that. And one thing that's worth demonstrating here is that there's the potential, and if you work with several layers at a time, you'll probably find this is actually fairly frequent occurrence. It's possible to click on a location and produce a pop-up for either multiple records in the same layer or different records from different layers that might be spatially coincident or stacked on top of one another, very close to each other. So for example, I'm going to turn on our TMDL and IP watersheds here. Turn on a few layers, and you can see here now we have a good example of some stacked polygons where we can see we have, in some cases, implementation watersheds stacked on top of Chesapeake or non-Chesapeake Bay Tmdl watersheds. So if I click this, it's going to produce basically the quickest layer, the first layer that pops up. But what you'll want to be aware of or look for here is this 1 of 5. So that tells me that where I clicked, there's actually 5 qualifying records. They may be in the same data set, they may not be. So the first one that's produced is this Upper Rapidan River. We can see the attribute information here, as well as a couple of links to information about that record. But if we want to see what else that we have access to for that location we click, we know there's 5 records. I can click this arrow, and now this is going to start iterating me through those other features that also, have some sort of component at that location where I clicked. So here's another implementation watershed record. Here's the Chesapeake Bay, and you'll see it's kind of hard to see with the symbology here, but the selection outline's also changing in the background. So that's kind of highlighting or showing you the spatial area of the record that the pop-up's showing you. So there's 2 Chesapeake Bay Tmdls, and actually there's 3 of them. So you can see there the varying TMDL EQID. And so you see there the selection kind of went back to the smaller implementation watershed boundary, whereas when I click over, it's the larger TMDL watershed here that's getting highlighted. So very important, kind of easy to miss, just be on the lookout for that 1 of multiple. And when you see that, you know that you've actually clicked multiple records, possibly accidentally, but something to be aware of. So I'll go ahead and turn that off. The last thing that I think is probably worth mentioning in regards to pop-ups is we've looked a lot at our DEQ data layers. It's worth mentioning that all of our external data layers down here in this bottom group of layers also supports pop-ups. So if we turn on, for example, EPA's RCRA corrective action, you click it, you'll see the attribute information again for that as well. So all the layers that are in here, as long as they're a point line or polygon type geospatial layer, should support pop-ups. That's going to go ahead and do it for the pop-up demonstration video. So tune back in for more of our training videos in relation to Environmental Data Mapper, and we'll see you next time.